Let's bow our heads again. Our most gracious and loving Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for all that you've done for us. So thankful for the messages that you give to us. Father, please send your Holy Spirit to be with us and to guide us today. We ask in your precious and holy name. Amen. Is this on? Okay, it's on. I just wanted to thank John. John actually started on the book of Revelation, and I thought it was very appropriate, that we start going through some of these end time events. And I was actually sent a video by someone, and it was about last day events. And I thought, wow, this should really be interesting. And it specifically was focusing on the Sunday law. I thought, oh, this should be really interesting. We want to see how this all turns out. And as I began to listen to it, it kind of changed my whole thinking. I should say the perception that I was given. This gentleman, and I will admit that he was an Adventist, and that he's an Adventist pastor teacher, and he was doing a symposium for one of the conferences on end time events. And his presupposition was that all things are not as we perceive them to be. And I was kind of surprised at that. And he started out talking about Ellen White and saying, well, Ellen White, he actually classified it as two different types. One as a classical prophet, and one as an apocalyptic prophet. And I thought a prophet was a prophet. But what he tried to bring out was the fact that Jeremiah and Ellen White and some of these were prophets only for their time period. And so what he began to bring out was that Ellen White's quotes and stuff like that were specifically designed for her time period. And I thought to myself, how can that be? We have all these quotes from Ellen White about the Sabbath, the state of the dead, and the Sunday law. And yet, he's here trying to tell us that everything that she did was specifically for her time period. One of his statements that he went after, mentions the fact that it says, from the great controversy he actually pulled up, it says, in the movements now in progress in the United States to secure for institutions and usages of the church the support of the state, Protestants are following in the steps of papists. Nay, more, they are opening the door for papacy to regain in the Protestant America the supremacy which she has lost in the old world. And that which gives greater significance to this movement is the fact that the principal object contemplated is the enforcement of Sunday observance, a custom which originated with Rome and which she claims as a sign of her authority. Well, he took this statement and he says, this is the statement that she said. And to me, it says that America is going to create laws that are actually going to cause the enforcement. But what he focused on was, it says the very first paragraph there, it says, in the movements now in progress. In other words, so he was saying that these things are in progress right now and that they were for her time, which I thought was really, really interesting. And he says, that there was a high Protestant population back then. Back in the 1840s, the number of Catholics was only 3 to 5% of the population. But by the 1880s, it was up to like 17 or 18% because of the influx from the other Catholic countries like Ireland and some of these other countries. So he was basically saying that the Protestant that I should say that the United States is no longer a Protestant country, that it's basically a secular country, and so forth. Some of these things wouldn't be applicable today. He also went on to say that if Ellen White were alive today, he said her message would be totally different. He said she wouldn't be following the same ideology and the same philosophy that she did back then. And he said, and the reason he felt like she was a classical prophet rather than an apocalyptic prophet was because that she didn't talk about computers, and she didn't talk about space travel, and she didn't talk about cell phones. And I thought, how many prophets that we know of talked about computers or space travel? I mean, and that was part of the basis of what he was saying. And I thought to myself, wow, here we have an Adventist educator doing a symposium on last day events, telling people that Ellen White's writings really don't matter. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm so glad that we live kind of maybe more on the East Coast than on the West Coast. But then he began to come up with some possible differences, talking about, I think most of us feel like the mark of the beast is a sign of Sunday worship. But he said, there are actually 4 possibilities according to him. It says it could be a different day that people worship on. It wouldn't maybe not have to be Sunday. Or all the days in the week could be the same. Any day of the week. Or maybe no day of the week. Maybe it was all abolished by Christ, which really surprised me when he said that. And then he said, or maybe it's just keeping of the Sabbath day is different. And I thought, wow, here he is talking about all these different things that could be taking place. And he kept putting, you might say, little innuendos in there about, well, this might be or it could be, just to the fact that let people know that, put doubt in people's minds. But I think if we look at, Malachi 3:6, and I think we all know most of what that is, it says, "For I am the Lord, and I change not." So the Lord is the one who is instructing, giving all these visions to Ellen White and to guiding all of the prophets. And to say that the Lord only does it for a specific time is not correct. He also started talking about, on Great Controversy in page 579, it says, since the middle of the 19th century, students of prophecy in the United States have presented this testimony to the world. In the events now taking place is seen rapid advance toward the fulfillment of this prediction. With Protestant teachers, there is the same claim of divine authority for Sunday keeping and the same lack of scriptural evidence as with the papal leaders who fabricated miracles to come up in the place of the command of God. The assertion that God's judgments are visited upon men for their violation of the Sunday Sabbath will be repeated. Already it is beginning to be urged, and the movement to enforce Sunday observance is fast gaining ground. Once again, he took just a small segment out of this paragraph, and he says, in the events now taking place. So he was saying that this was not something that's progressing through, but it was all taking place in her time. And I was really I just was kind of almost blown away by the fact that here he is, an educator in one of our universities, teaching people that Ellen White doesn't matter, that the Sunday is not the mark of the beast. And it was just really kind of interesting to me to know that these things are going through even our own Adventist churches. Also, he said um, in Great Controversy, page 592, the dignitaries of church and state will unite to bribe, persuade, or compel all classes to honor Sunday. The lack of divine authority will be supplied by oppressive enactments. Political corruption is destroying love of justice and regard for truth. And even in free America, rulers and legislatures, in order to secure public favor, will yield to the popular demand for law enforcing Sunday observance. Liberty of conscience, which has cost so great a sacrifice, will no longer be respected. In the soon coming conflict, we shall see exemplified the prophet's words. The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. Once again, in this paragraph, talking about how all are going to be compelled to worship on Sunday, he picked out just the one phrase, in the soon coming conflict, saying that in 1888, this would have been a conflict that would have been taking place right around the corner. And so he was trying to downplay completely everything that was being said. But what is the image of the beast? As John was just mentioning, just read in our text in Revelation, it's an actual symbolic unity between the church and the ideology of the papacy. And I thought it was kind of interesting that I wanted to find out where all of this actually began. And so I actually looked up Constantine's edict back in 321 AD. And this is the actual translation from I believe it was Greek. It says, all judges and city people and the craftsmen shall rest upon the venerable day of the sun. Country people, however, may feel freely to attend the cultivation of the fields, because it frequently happens that no other days are better adapted for planting or the grain in the furrows or the vines in the trenches, so that the advantage given heavenly providence may not, for the occasion of a short time, perish. So that was actually what the edict was all about. But there's so many statements Ellen White makes that he, seemed to completely go over. On page 53 of Great Controversy, it says, the Sunday law of Constantine, the law issued by the emperor regarding the day of rest and labor, reads, and we just read that. And it says, when this nation shall abjure the principles of its government as to enact Sunday law, Protestantism will join hands with popery. I mean, it seems to me so very clear in many of her statements what the true mark of the beast will be. It says, Protestants will throw their whole influence and strength on the side of the papacy. By a national act enforcing the false Sabbath, they will give life and vigor to the corrupt faith of Rome, reviving her tyranny and oppression of conscience. That's in the book Maranatha, page 179. In the Review and Herald, February 16th of 1905, she says, sooner or later, the Sunday laws will be passed. And many people are talking about, well, it's so hard. How could we, with Muslims and with Hindus and all these different countries, have a national Sunday law and then a universal Sunday law? But I think they forget that God is the one who sees the future. He's the one that knows what's going to take place. And by this, he was letting us know what is going to take place in the future. In one of her manuscripts releases on page 278, she says, soon the Sunday laws will be enforced, and men in positions of trust will be embittered against the little handful of God's commandment-keeping people. And just imagine, though, how the prophecies back in the time of William Miller, back when William Miller was preaching, he was preaching about the 2300 days. and there was a lot of skepticism and a lot of people who didn't believe what was going on. But when Josiah Litch came along, I don't know how many of you people realize, but Josiah Litch back in 1838 started going through the chapter 9 of Revelation, and he actually calculated when the fall of the Ottoman Empire was 2 years before it took place, and actually documented this in a book. So when the fall of the empire, it was the Ottoman Empire was completely ruling Turkey and was ruling all throughout these countries in the Eastern Roman Empire area there. And to say that the Ottoman Empire was going to collapse seemed like craziness to a lot of people. But he said that in August of 1840, this would actually take place. And sure enough, on August 11th, based on the prophecies that he translated from Revelation 9, it actually fell, and the kingdom was turned over, and people began to realize that, well, if this is true, then what William Miller is saying about 1844 must really be true too. And this really put an impetus on the mark of on the second coming and on all the things that were taking place. But many people say that, well, there's so many things that are going to have to take place, but it's going to be hard for us at times. But the arguments that the people are going to put out against us, it says Satan puts his interpretation upon events, and they think as they would have them, that the calamities which fill the land and are a result of Sunday breaking, thinking to appease the wrath of God, these influential men make laws enforcing Sunday observance. In other words, all these calamities, look what just happened, 2 days ago or 3 days ago in Surfside, Florida. A building that had been there for 40 years and gone through hurricane after hurricane, and all of a sudden it just completely collapses. It looked like an implosion to me, the way it was dropped right straight down. But people are saying, well, these are going to be becoming more and more frequent, and these are the type of things that are going to cause people to believe that not worshiping on Sunday is what's causing this. It says, this very class put forth the claim that the fast-spreading corruption is largely attributable to the desecration of the so-called Christian Sabbath, that of Sunday, and the enforcement of Sunday observance would greatly improve the morals of society. This claim is especially urged in America, where the doctrine of the true Sabbath has been most widely preached. In other words, wherever the Sabbath is most widely preached, that's where this enforcement is going to come from. It's going to come basically from the legislatures here in the United States of America. And we see that if we look at Revelation 13, talking about the two-horned beast. Well, that's basically, we know that the two-horned beast that come up out of the land signifies what? There's hardly any people there. And so the land that came up would be then the United States of America, which was supposed to come up around the time of the deadly wound that was deadly wound that was inflicted. And we know that in 1798, that's when Berthier actually walked into the Vatican and took the French general Berthier, walked in and took the Pope captive, inflicting this mortal wound. And then what country was coming up around that same time? The United States of America. And so it goes on to show that many things were taking place at that time. In 1776, obviously, we declared our independence. In 1783, there was the signing of the Treaty of Paris. And then in September 17th of 1787, our Constitution was signed. And the prophecies in Revelation 13 go on and talk about the lamb-like beast and how it would actually imitate and give rise to this image of the beast, which we know from the Revelation 13 is the Sunday worship. You know, it's been shown also that the United States is the power represented, and that this prophecy will be fulfilled when the United States shall enforce Sunday observance, which Rome claims as the special acknowledgement of her supremacy. In other words, Rome makes it clear that she is the one who actually made the change from Saturday to Sunday. And then it says, I saw one of the heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. The infliction of the deadly wound points to the downfall of papacy, obviously in 1798. But back in I believe it was 1929, when they reestablished communication with the Pope, they allowed them to become a political, religio-political state. And so at that point, the wound was healed. And it was funny because on some of the major newspapers, like the New York Times, it said right across the top banner, deadly wound healed. And it was strictly a complete enforcement of what we already know. Since the middle of the 19th century, you know, students of the United States have understood that the United States was in this prophecy. And judgments are visited upon the violation of Sunday-keeping people. You know, and if we look at some of these characteristics in Daniel 7, which talks about the characteristics of this little horn power, and there's multiple indicators for who that power might be. But as we've gone through these, we begin to understand that, you know, times are changing. Things are, even within our Adventist church, Ellen White is being diminished. The correlation between the papacy and the end times is being diminished. Many of these things are changing over and over, above and beyond what I never thought would ever happen in our church. What I want to just basically get out of this is that basically that, you know, we need to be aware. We need to be studying. We need to know our Bibles. We need to know what the prophecies are. Because even when these men of, quote, renown, these teachers of philosophies from our different universities, when they start telling us things that are different, things that we may question, you know, we need to be aware and be on our toes so that we know what's going on, so that we study for ourselves. And it's very important that we have a basic understanding of these things in our own minds. Of course, Revelation 18:4 says, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached into heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. So basically, you know, we see these different things that are taking place. We see how even in our own church and throughout, times are changing, philosophies are changing, but we need to be grounded. We need to be well aware of all the things that are taking place in our own lives, and we need to study ourselves. We can't just go on what somebody else has told us. We need to be sure that we understand and that we are well prepared when the time of the end comes. Thank you. Let's sing our closing hymn.